guys. Hello and welcome to the Guest Light Podcast, episode 43. We have the pleasure today. We're doing a little Joe Rogan feel. We got some scotch going, and we've got the powerhouse, James Buckley, in the house for episode 43. If you know, you know, and if you don't know, you're going to find out by the end of this podcast. But, we're going to talk accounting, we're going to talk networking, we're going to talk people, business. James is a partner at DJB, a tax partner, personal estate tax planning, compliance service, and businesses of all size. James specializes in mid to high?
Yeah.
Mid to high. So we're going to hear his story. So welcome, James.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So I had the fortunate, I think it's been 3 or 4 years now that I've known you?
I thought longer with hockey, but then we'll go with that.
I think it was pretty quick since hockey. But yeah, so James has been a huge part of our business success and growth over the years, and then just it's kind of networked down, I'd say, kind of like a spider web effect of like, oh yeah, we use them, or oh, we could use them or should use them. And I thought, like, what more boring of a person I could bring on from an accounting perspective than the opposite of James, because James is not boring. He's not your typical accountant. He's outgoing, he's flourished, and he's ready to go. So tell us a little bit about how you got into accounting.
Yeah, it was a complete accident. So I initially wanted to look at doing engineering and had a lot of friends that were going through those engineering management programs and coming out after 5 years engineering management and not being able to find a job. And so when I was in first year business, I was talking with my good friend Donnie, and I just was kind of lost. I said, hey, what are you going to do after business? And he said, oh, my dad's a controller or something somewhere, and he has a CA, and he does pretty well. So I'm going to do that. And I said, okay, I'll do it too. And that literally, I've told that story in job interviews, and that's the truth. So then I started down the road of accounting, and I was quite bad at it.
Yeah.
I was told that it was mathy. It's not mathy, it's addition and subtraction. Don't take any shot at accountants or anything like that, but it's using a subset of rules in a way for audit, insurance, and things like that. And I found that I just wasn't good at it, and then stumbled across tax in university and found that as a home in terms of the framework and problem solving and structuring things, and have stuck with that ever since. So that's how I got into it.
And so, like, for everyone, like, the decision on the difference between tax planning and accounting, because you come as a package with Nicky Boy.
And others, yeah. So it's, we use the joke, it's like the Jedi approach, right? There's two of us. You're going to have an assurance person, sometimes mixed up with insurance. It's assurance, meaning, your financial statements and tax returns and things like that. And then a tax person who's really there for the structuring and things like that. Not that either party can't blend over into either role, but you kind of cover all bases when you're in meetings or servicing a client that way. And so we find that that's a good approach to service a client in that manner.
And isn't it interesting? You say, like, what am I going to do well, right? In terms of, like, how am I going to get a job on the university? And, like, nowadays, like, you feel like as an employer, do you find now it's like, I couldn't believe that I thought that if I was motivated and talented, I wouldn't be able to get a job back then?
No. I think that accounting it specifically has always been a meat market, though, right? It's just been right. Like you are forced to get your CA through a firm. That's changed now. I think you can do it at banks or other things. And so you didn't have an option. You would come in and you knew that it was like D-Day every day. That was just something you were exposed to.
Really?
And yeah, that's how accounting was. And now it's definitely been a shift in the market to more, trying to achieve more work-life balance from an earlier age. Where work-life today, still it's something I struggle with greatly, as I know we all do. But back then when you were coming up, you would never pretend like you were going to have some type of work-life balance as a junior accountant, or at least that's how I perceive that.
Yeah. Man,
it's good. It's a good change, though. It's a good change. I'm not saying it's a bad one.
Yeah,
right?
No, man, it's funny. Like we have apprentices come through our program, and we're very transparent of how our program runs. But like, two things. One, is when you're younger, I think for a lot of people in industry, it's just like you want to make more money. So you want to do more work to make more money. And that's a little bit of the driving factor. I think once you get older, you realize like all the money in the world is not the answer to happiness if that's what you're trying to fulfill. But I always remember hearing like lawyers or accountants specifically like, yeah, I put in like 60 hours last week. And it's like, yeah, but you're on salary. And so when we put in 60 hours as, apprentices, it was like, well, we're getting paid overtime and stuff like that. Did you find that a bit of a challenge when now you went from being that guy? Because I know you were always the overachiever putting in the hours.
Yeah, I think I had a mission that I was on, and but that obviously changes as you go through your career. But I wanted to make partner, and that's all I wanted to do, rightfully or wrongfully. So I took steps and did things to go down that path, one of which in my journey was not to focus on work-life balance. And I don't say that like that's not a good thing for people to do, but that's just the way it turned out for me. So I think that the good part of that is you can learn a lot in a short period of time because it's all you're doing, right? The bad side is, sometimes your personal life can suffer or, you don't work out as much as you should or diet and exercise. Right. So I think for me, it was trying to shift towards that. But now, again, I say it again, I think that younger people definitely have different priorities. I can see them at a younger age seeing that maybe it's less about just making partner, less about making more money and more like, hey, maybe I want flex time or maybe it's, can I earn more vacation, things like that, right? But it's different.
And what are you guys doing? DJB, tell us a little bit about like the size and scale that you guys are at because you're definitely the biggest accounting firm that I've ever dealt with. But also I found like you specialized, which I thought was really cool, which from a small business mindset, I didn't know kind of existed. I thought it was like, you go speak to the accountant, he or she, and then they have, a small team under them, but it's more, administrative work.
Yeah, like I think for us, I think what you consider a mid-size or small mid-size accounting firm, but we don't do any public company work or public company assurance work, like public audits, for example, intentionally to focus on the owner-managed business. And the owner-managed business could be, a professional, like a doctor. The owner-managed business could be a home builder with hundreds of millions of fair market value, land value, right? So it's a big spread. In terms of what our thing was we were really like we had a flex plan before COVID. Like COVID took away a lot of our advantages, right? Because I think we were early to the game on things like flex plan and working from home that I don't think was as common in other accounting firms. Then COVID came, and now it's just common for every industry and everybody to do it. But yeah, I would say that we're still big on getting the right level of work to the right person and putting our money where our mouth is to the best we can with having a good flex time policy. Yeah. And also having a good work from home geographical policy. Because for me, like if someone can do a really good piece of work and they're sitting on Jupiter, like, as long as they can execute, and with Zoom and Teams now being much more common, I like that. I don't mind that.
Yeah. Did you have that going through the process?
When I came up?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. No, I went through different iterations of trying to, we've talked about it too, trying to get up early, be the first one there. And then I found I was working late anyways. So then I'm like, I might as well get in at 8:30 instead of 5 because I'm going to be working till 8:30. I had a choice, right? I know no one forced me ever to do that, right? But no, it was not something that was customary before.
And that's why you're here today, right? Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your approach, because we talked about it before, and I thought it was great. You said that you're the extroverted, introverted accountant, because I think when I think of an accountant, and even when I'm looking for an accountant, you were not what I pictured in the sense of, a numbers guy behind the screen, being able to run accounting all day. I'm assuming can be mundane, but for someone that enjoys it is enjoyable.
Yeah, I think you started with saying I was an extrovert, and I was like, I think I'm probably slightly more introverted. Maybe others would laugh at that, but then I think we compromised on maybe I could be considered extroverted among accountants.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think that with every career or business, you're going to have yin and yang. And yeah, I think my side of it is on the client facing, communicating, distilling complicated concepts into digestible terms for the business owner at all stages. So we like to try to support young business and growing business. And we can also execute, and our bread and butter would typically be mature businesses or vastly growing, or at the M&A, the saleable or purchase stage of things.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting when you kind of, for me anyway, going through the process of kind of onboarding with you. For anyone listening, I went into James's office. I said, I met him playing hockey. And I said, who's this guy walking in the room? He had, at the time, I think he had a suit on, Barwell, and just kind of like ready to go. But we got on the ice and he was actually really good. And I go, what are you doing? I was accounting. And I go, yeah, I'm actually looking for a new accountant. I think you fluffed me off about 3 times. And finally I was like, man, I'm in the market. And, I think the big thing was how you guys onboarded us in terms of creating a partnership, a true partnership within an industry for long-term growth. How much time do you spend or do you see a lot of the times when someone's just not ready for say a full accounting firm?
Yeah, that's something that is difficult to ascertain up front. We always say when we're onboarding business, we are not in the business of poaching work, nor would we want to be. You're in the business of adding value. So when you and I had an initial discussion, you came at me with wants and things you wanted to get to and what you wanted to do. And, we were up front in terms of saying, if you need help, then, we could provide it. But in terms of the client trying to figure out where they're at, it is difficult, right? Because sometimes clients want to grow, and not doing the proper things up front can hinder that, but there's costs associated with that, sometimes more than people want or more than they're willing to bear. On the flip side, when you just you're starting a business. You want to make sure you have proof of concept. You want to keep cost and complexity as low as humanly possible. Yeah. And so maybe a more volume-based shop could be a fit for you at that time. So usually the approach is just to try to have a discussion, discuss your services, discuss what you think may or may not be a best fit. And you take it from there, and you hope that has a synergistic relationship built in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember going into James's office for the first time, sitting down with you and Nick, and pretty much him challenging the shit out of us, saying, well, where are you making the most money? Well, I don't know. Well, what are your projections for next year? Well, I don't know. If the phone rings more times than it did last year, we'll be higher than we were last year, right? And I truly believed that. I was so frustrated, I think, by the end of our first meeting, saying man, what's this guy talking about projections, and how am I supposed to know what I'm not? I'm not just selling a product, I'm selling services, and it's based on who calls and all this stuff. And how wrong I was at that stage, being so slow to judge on how quickly you can actually get financial literacy on your business with the right people asking you for that kind of guidance. But yeah, we had a meeting this year that went completely different, just in terms of financial understanding and understanding a balance sheet and understanding, a P&L. You just make such a difference as business. Do you find as businesses grow that kind of enhances?
Not always. You ideally want it to. Not everyone is going to take the same approach as you, where you always want to be learning and want to, try to really invest in process and procedure and have a vision. There are a lot of businesses that can do extremely well that don't take that focus. Is that more of a gamble and the best way to do things? I think a lot of advisors would say no. Yeah. But it really takes the individual to drive that. And I think what happens in their businesses a lot, and we've talked about this in yours, is working in the business as opposed to working on the business. It's difficult to achieve that yin and yang, right? Because some people can work with advisors and it really have a good understanding of what each party needs to do in order for for that relationship to work in the business to really go in the right direction. And I do find others where they kind of want you to have, all the answers. And sometimes it's difficult because you are only just an add-on to the business, right? You're doing tax or financial advisory, right? Yeah. It's really on the owner to take that and take from all other pieces, their lawyer, their coaches, their this, their that, and work on their business, right?
Yeah, and things are changing drastically all the time, right? I remember we weren't like taking advantage of a tax credit for apprenticeships, for onboarding apprentices. How do you guys, man, it's changing all the time. I was just at that event that you guys put on for the realtors or for the construction industry, but how do you keep up on all the changing, policy? Is it the right term, policy?
Yeah, sure. Legislation. It is difficult. That's the punchline, right? And that's why you need, in my opinion, as clients get bigger and bigger, you need the bandwidth and the people to be investing in that, right? Because things like credits changing, or obviously all the COVID subsidy things that we just came through, that's one thing. But then there's all the high level tax planning in my world, like things like the 111.4E and the migration that were, menu based tax plans that have been going on for a while. They were just shut down in April, but there's still talk about other things that you can do with sale planning, but that stuff changes fast, and there's high risk and high complexity, and you just have to be able to dedicate enough of your time and enough of your practice to ever learning in order to stay ahead of it, and make sure you try the best possible to download that to your clients.
Yeah. Well, and you guys do a great job of kind of outputting the information that you guys are receiving.
You try to push it as best you can, right? Yeah. You're not going to be able to push everything, right? So that's why it's nice when you have clients looking at stuff too. But on the flip side, you want to try to avoid you're playing golf with someone and someone's like, hey, Dan, why don't you do the this or that? And you're like, well, I haven't heard about that, right? And then it's nice to try to get in front of it as much as you can, right? Just so your client's aware, knows what's a fit for them or what's not, right?
Yeah. And then, man, it's crazy how much stuff's going on, especially at that level that makes such a big swing impact on, potential profits, but also, we've seen it lately, especially I think COVID enhanced that a little bit, but also in a bit of a positive, right? Whatever it brings to light is a good thing. But in terms of selling a business, right? Is it a business or is it an owner-operator organization? Are you seeing now a lot more, just because I think it's more, you kind of really got to be in the dark if you're not planning for something like that. But do you find there's a lot of people kind of on their exit strategy that they don't have an exit strategy?
Yes. Yeah. I think that there's just some businesses that get approached and they were never thinking of it or wasn't top of mind.
Yeah.
Now they have to deal with it. And are they structured or positioned to do that in the best way then? Who knows? But on the flip side, there's some other businesses that are very deliberate in terms of timing. Like, hey, if we don't start and sell this thing in 5 to 7 years, something went horribly wrong.
Really?
Oh yeah, that's something to be said for that, right? And it's not all that's not a one size fits all approach. Matters on individual and age and industry and interest rates and all that type of stuff, right?
Man, it's so interesting. The only thing I hear about a lot in tech, but then I started hearing about it a lot in the insurance business. Before I got into it, I didn't realize everyone was buying everybody else and buying book of business, and how you structure it at the beginning can also be how you kind of exit at the end. And also one of the things we talked about that was a big change is, when do you open a holding company? So for any, business owners out there, in terms of I remember I opened a sole proprietorship for about 4 days and then was told to close it and incorporate back in the day before I had, proper support and advice. But yeah, are you seeing a lot in the market, that kind of lack of understanding?
I would say it's way better now than it was before. Information, I just think, is more readily available, and I think people are searching out professional advice, because like, as you know, as your business grows in size and revenue and complexity, you go from the most basic decisions of, hey, what is what is a holding company? How does it operate? Why would I use it? Like, what's my, how do I want to approach credit proofing? How do I want to approach, where do I want to make investments? If do I want to put them in my operating company? That's kind of on the first stage up into, are you looking at a foreign structure? Are you looking at your exit plan? Are you looking at how to carve off divisions, or like how you found in different aspects how there was, let's call them other non-tax reasons to hold divisions in different entities.
Totally.
Right. And that's not something that, you don't figure out unless you're discussing it and working through it, right? As opposed to, let's just throw it in here and figure it out later, right? Which sometimes works out, but it's more of a gamble, right?
Yeah, for everybody listening, we created Guest International, and what it is just we get together and discuss everything. But we have James and Nick, so tax planning and accounting. We have our lawyer Natalie, and myself. Sometimes we bring in the banks, but having these the key players that end up discussing these things with each other, I find it's like, first of all, like even though it's an expensive meeting, it ends up being like, as long as there's one takeaway, it's always worthwhile every single time. And I think over the years, they just keep getting better and better and better because you start kind of forward planning a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then what do you think about like partnerships within your industry? You guys work with a lot of lawyers, a lot of banks. How important have you found over the years is to keep and strengthen those relationships?
Yeah, I think it's vital, right? You want to build out relationships with people that you can rely on, and then they rely on you, and you find out what they're good at, they find out what you're good at, and you just try your damnedest to put your money where your mouth is and look out for those people with opportunities to work together. Whether it is legal or banking or business brokerage or insurance or whatever, right? And sometimes it's not today, but sometimes it is tomorrow in both instances, right? And so having synergistic relationships, not like in expecting some type of, tit for tat type of thing at all, just more like, and we've talked about it before too, like becoming friends, building a relationship as opposed to it just being, business driven. Because for me, like, work and personal life is this Venn diagram that's very middle based, right? Where other people would say they hate that, right? Like they don't want any kind of overlap between their personal life and their work life. And there's no right or wrong answer. Just for me, it became the people that I'm closest with, 8 times out of 10 have some type of business connection somehow, That doesn't mean we work together, but I met you through something or saw you here or did that there type of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting concept around that. Like, I think, some of my closest friends are my business associates, right? It just ends up being that way. And I think it's because you really get ingrained in, like, not just like a vulnerable conversation all the time, but it's like, how are you overcoming this? And sometimes it's such an overwhelm that having that relationship be bonded by the ability to kind of discuss some of these challenging topics, rather than your friends being like, back in high school days, or talking about a night going out, or talking about random nonsense. You're talking about those really core values that are driving, your success, but also your business, so that your personal life can be accelerated, if you're looking for that balance.
Not everyone is.
So talking about that career path that you discussed about, talking to your buddy's dad, or was it your buddy's dad?
Buddy Don. I just talked to Donnie. I think the discussion, I remember it was in front of the Willy dog there at Mac, probably over a hot dog with the crumpled chips on it. Yeah. And it was like a 1-second conversation. So what advice would you give to, someone coming up or your younger self in terms of like going through that journey? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's tough.
Would you recommend your industry? Would you recommend it to someone that's motivated and driven?
Yes, because it's great training. You learn a lot in accounting, similar in legal. I think you learn a lot about business and how that works. So I think it's invaluable, especially if you end up in in a business vein. So I would say yes, it makes sense to look at something like that. The advice I would give, and I'm not sure it's good or not, would be, you know, pick a lane, right? Like I picked accounting well, I guess I picked accounting before I really knew about tax that much.
Yeah.
And I found a home in it. And I put my head down and I did it. And, you know, I think sometimes people can get a little bit wishy-washy. Like I would love to be a guitar player playing 80s ballads, you know, at bars and making a living from that. But I don't think that it would be able to support my family. So I don't, right? But at some point you get to a point where you just got to pick a lane. Some people know their lane from, you know, 10 years old, and some people figure it out a little bit later. But I would say, I don't know, once you've kind of done enough analysis and you get to the crossroads of like what you're going to do, I think you pick a lane and you go with it. But actually, now that I'm talking it through, pick a lane would be one of the things. The other thing would be do more than no digging like I did. So I talked to a couple buddies that said, oh man, I can't find a job as an engineer. And then I just panicked and did something else, right? Like you know, being involved, talking to your parents and their friends, or talking to other people that are in career, going to career things that, well, I'll speak for you and I don't think you and I would have ever done it at 16 or 20 or something like that, right?
No way.
Like in high school or university. So maybe it's just, you know, more and more of that to try to educate yourself more. But now it's like, well, the internet existed then, obviously, but like there's just more and more avenues to find that type of information. And so I don't know. That was probably just a shotgun blast of things, but
I like
a couple of things to think about maybe.
No, I mean, I remember like learning about my buddy. I got into plumbing because my buddy's dad was a plumber, and he lived on a big ranch farmhouse, and he owned a small business. And man, like, this is what that could be. It's like, okay, it's a job for now. I don't know where I'm doing. I don't know what I like. And, you know, for me, it was I can do hard work. I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to do more than most. And I was really motivated by money.
Well, perception drives reality, right? Like if you saw that person living out of their car, it wouldn't be something that you'd want to do, right? Like
100%.
And then that's actually the other thing to think about now. Now here you go. Now you ask a question. I'm you know, the wheels are, the hamster's turning here. Like I would say, and it's an easy combo, but like owning a business is nice because in terms of usually in accounting or for the most part, you know, medical or something like that, it's a cash flow business, right? You earn throughout your career and you hope you can store away enough to have a good retirement and, you know, maybe there's some type of pension or something. And that would be, in most cases, obviously there's some medical or accounting practices that are saleable, but in most cases, right? Whereas someone who owns a business has the dual component. They generate the cash flow that they ideally need to live and grow and invest. But then they also are building this asset that they're able to transition away from for a value. And I'm seeing more and more businesses that people started in their late 20s or 30s. And now they don't need to go to 60, 70, 80, you know, at 51 years old. They go, yeah, this is good. And they sell that business.
Yep.
And they do it on a very tax advantaged basis because there's tons of deferrals and exemptions and plans you could do to reduce your tax. And so I would say if I would know then what I know now, it would be looking at, you know, building something like that.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. I think that's great advice.
Wish I took it. wish I got it. Wish I got it and wish I took it.
That's the whole point of it.
I love my career. Everything's great.
All right, guys. Well, on that note, you know, James, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute blast, guys. Again, you know, this podcast is put on for people to understand the journeys that we take, and whether it's over eating a hot dog that's going to take you down a career path, which is perfect, and or, you know, getting information, going to school. You know, the journey didn't happen overnight. It always takes a really long time. But that being said, there's a lot of benefits, and James and his team at DJB do some incredible work. So all their socials, all their website handles are going to be down in the links below, guys. So if you want to check them out, please feel free to reach out. They do an amazing job. And we want to always ask ourselves these questions. Why not me? Why not now? You know, change can happen overnight. It doesn't have to be on a Monday. It doesn't have to be over a lifetime. And And thanks so much for tuning in. So thanks, James.
Dan, thanks a lot for having me. And as per usual, we appreciate your support. I appreciate your friendship. And, you've been very supportive of us. Hopefully we've been able to support you at least 1% along the way. And look forward to drinking with you and growing old in business together.
There we go. Thanks, man. Sweet.